European defence ministers have agreed to press on with a drone wall project along their borders with Russia and Ukraine. This is to defend against the type of recent air incursions widely believed to have Russian origins or backing. Unauthorized drone flights over Danish airports have forced the shutdown of airspace in recent days, including last evening over Aalborg Airport. Other European countries, including Poland, have also been affected. These instances prompted the talks on Friday between defense ministers of European nations, particularly those, of course, on the EU's eastern border with Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian officials also attended the talks. After the meeting, European Commissioner for Defense Andrius Kubilius said it was time for action.
Russia is testing the EU and NATO, and our response must be firm, united and immediate. And at today's meeting we agreed to move from, let's say, discussions to concrete actions, and we agreed on most important points: that Eastern Flank Watch with a drone wall at its core and as some kind of priority for the moment.
DW correspondent Christine Mundwa has more. Christine, is the commissioner implying they believe Russia was behind all recent incursions?
Well, he certainly would be, because that is the operating assumption that officials within the European Union as well as NATO would be working under. There is no sort of categorical evidence that could say that these drones were by Russia, were sent into European airspace by Russia. And so that is, of course, the trouble with categorically saying that this is Russia. But it is clear that on the part of the EU and NATO, they believe that they are now having to defend against a Russia that is effectively testing NATO and the European Union's defenses. So this is where things are now. And I think one of the critical things here about where we are with these drone incursions is they don't quite meet the bar, Nicole, of what is considered a conventional attack, right, in sort of traditional warfare. So in as much as they've caused massive disruption, as we've seen in the case of Denmark this week with the delays and the flight cancellations at airports, we're still in that grey area now where, you know, how exactly do you classify this once you've even identified the actor, and so the response. But I think the immediate effort now on the part of European countries is to be able to take these drones down so that they do the least sort of interruption to daily life, civilian life, as well as posing a threat to security.
What else was discussed at the meeting today?
Well, one of the key things now is it's pretty clear that NATO countries, EU countries are having a hard time detecting these drones. And that's a crucial part of the effort now that is underway, to be able to equip countries, particularly those on the eastern flank of NATO, so to say, those who border Russia, to have them have the capability to be able to detect these drones. NATO has systems in place to pick up when a missile is in the airspace or fighter jet, but these drones are small, and you need new sort of acoustic sensors to be able to pick up on these drones. Then there is the aspect of where do you position them. These drones could effectively be coming from anywhere. That threat could also be coming from inside a specific country. So there is that. And then there's also the bit about once you've detected that drone, how you take it down. One of the things that the Defense Commissioner said in that press conference where you played a soundbite was that, you know, NATO has this sort of heavy machinery and artillery that costs a lot of money. But now you have a situation where you're using missiles with the price tag going up to $1 million to take down a drone that costs a fraction of the price. So Ukraine's defense minister was at the meeting today, and his input was really important because Ukraine has been dealing with these drone incursions, with these drone threats, and they've now adapted and developed low-cost capabilities to be able to take down these drones at a more cost-effective way. So that is what the big effort is now on this side, coming together with a coordinated plan with the help of Ukraine, because of the experience that Ukraine has had in the last few months, to be able to, one, detect these drones and effectively take them down.
That was DW correspondent Christine Mundwa in Brussels. Thanks so much for that.
Let's get more now from Ole Kverno. He's a former brigadier general in the Danish army and currently director of the National Danish Center for Defense Robotics and Autonomy. This center was set up last year to bring together Denmark's military with research and industrial capabilities in drones and autonomous systems. Thanks so much for joining us. Can I just ask you at the outset, Denmark has seen numerous drone incursions over its airports this past week. How would you say Denmark and Europe has responded to these incursions?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, I guess that you could describe it as a, if not strategic surprise, then at least an operational surprise or political shock. We quite clearly were complacent in thinking that we had tons of time to prepare regulation, etc., so as to create a clear responsibility division between responders and what national critical infrastructure owners should actually be prepared to do, or minimal criteria for what they should do. And we have not had that in place, and that's probably the reason why we were so unprepared.
I mean, you were talking about complacency. I'd just like to draw your attention to the drone incursions over Russia earlier in the month. Now, these were attributed to Russia, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called the NATO response, quote, a very successful reaction. And let's just talk about the reaction he's talking about. You had Polish F-16 fighters, Dutch F-35 fighters, Italian AWACS aircraft, NATO multi-role tanker aircraft, and German Patriot missile systems that were involved in shooting down 3 drones. Would you call that a very successful reaction?
Absolutely not. Quite on the contrary, it shows that we are unprepared for a symmetric drone-to-drone war or drone-to-drone hybrid war. It shows that the means we have are war means, and we can definitely shoot down drones by means of deploying, for example, F-35s or Patriot missile systems. But that's a very, very expensive trade-off. If you imagine the drones flying over Danish airports, we could take them down, but we could take them down only with missiles or similar kinetic systems, which obviously would be a very expensive way of taking out very cheap drones. So in terms of our preparedness, this shows our vulnerability and the urgency with which we need to get prepared now.
Europe is talking about this so-called drone wall. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has talked of building this drone wall. She's called it, quote, the bedrock of credible defense. How is the EU really approaching this then?
Well, that's very difficult for me to speak to, because quite obviously this is a concept that's very generic at the moment. It's very political. We don't know the content of it. And it appears that if you want to build a drone wall on your borders, it's more a wartime defense concept than it is a hybrid defense concept. I mean, you can deploy drones by so many means, through so many ways, other than flying them over the border. And that's exactly what we saw in Denmark. There's nobody who believes that the drones coming into Danish airspace over the last couple of days, that they were deployed from Kaliningrad or Belarus or something. So they were deployed by other means, probably locally, at least very decentralized.
There is currently a war in Europe, and Ukraine is one European nation that has been fighting the Russians when it comes to drones. What are the lessons that Europe can learn from Ukraine?
First of all, we need to get our regulation in place so that we create a clear responsibility and division of responsibility between state actors and the owners of national critical infrastructure. That's the first step. The next step is obviously learning from Ukraine that this war that we're seeing fought in Ukraine, that's a war over innovation. So we need to invest in ecosystems that can innovate and keep iterating innovation, rather than just investing in specific individual capabilities like a drone system or a counter UAS system. So what we need to do is gear up tremendously in terms of investing in our European ecosystem when it comes to drones and counter UXS systems.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Ola Kverno, Director of the National Danish Center for Defense, Robotics and Autonomy. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me, sir.